this person no longer exists, or these people no longer exist in melancholia. It's the ego itself that is impoverished. Well, that laceration of the ego can not only impoverish, but literally deplete all quotients of pleasure to the point of a superegoic cruelty that takes the life of its bearer. And similarly, I think that the inverse of that, if we're to try to think about murderous impulse, I think also comes in part for different reasons from the heightening of a certain kind of superegoic violence that is internal, that is externalized. The mechanisms of all of this we could talk about in some way, but my point here is that when we talk about cultural norms that establish which lives will be mourned and which lives will not, which lives are intelligible, which lives are not intelligible, whose deaths we mark, whose deaths remain unmarkable, we are actually talking in part about how the social field is inscribed in my experience. And it seems to me that we're also trying to think about a political problem that has the problem of mourning at its center, which cannot be thought without psychoanalysis, as I understand it. So that would be, I think, maybe the two links. What I see, I think that the notion of the gap is very important in Slavoj's work. And I almost hear you making an injunction: hold open the gap. In a way, hold open the gap between the one and the I. And that's something about the closing of that gap is perilous, right?
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say? Yeah.
Go ahead. No, sorry.
No. I'm just saying. But then it seems to me that the problematic you're dealing with is a problematic in which there are norms of conformity or of how do you put it, decency.
Yeah.
Of what one does, of a kind of homogeneous other,
yeah.
And the perils of a certain kind of collapse of the I into that set of norms. And what the gap does is actually open up a dissonance which allows for a disidentification or an unconscious the unconscious self. And I'm thinking that might be a slightly different social problematic. I mean, the social that you have in mind when you talk about the social field described in my experience might be a slightly different one, although I think it also carries the possibility of superegoic violence with it.
No, I totally agree here with you, because my point was in no way to assert the positive function of this externalized other. On the contrary, if anything, for me, let's not forget nonetheless that even dogmatically, one of the basic Lacanian definitions of the end of psychoanalysis is precisely to assume, as he puts it, the non-existence of the big other. So that goes. What I wanted to say is first, let me thank you, but I don't mean it in an ironical, but also in another sense, that the wonderful formula, which for me, and I think you are probably conscious of it, refers to Lacan's formula of psychosis: what is foreclosed from the symbolic returns in the real, what is foreclosed from mourning returns in melancholy. I read this as you're covered, as Deleuzian would have put it, le devenir lacanien de Judith. That's the put it. Okay, you would violently disagree, I know. So let me go to another level.
Not even violently.
That's friendly. That's the true bitchiness, but that's another point. Yeah. Okay, let me go to more serious matters. I was deeply affected.
And then I think we do need to talk about Freud and Lacan a little bit.
Okay. Let me just finish this. A couple of points. First, very briefly, the prohibition of mourning that you mentioned.
Yes.
I know maybe a story from my own experience after the war. What interests me is how, even in communist countries, which were the most, apparently, officially anti-Nazis, there was, I claim, a strange prohibition of this kind at work. For example, if you visit the sites of concentration camps which were in like the one close to Weimar, I think it was, I forgot which one, where Ernst Thälmann was imprisoned in East Germany. It's incredible how the whole operation was to present Jews there as, they emphasized it, just one among. There were Jews, but especially there were communists. So the image you got there is that concentration camps were really basically to imprison as many as possible of the thriving anti-fascist resistance and so on there. What I mean is the following. It's deeper than this. It's kind of a deep uneasiness with those who survived the Holocaust, especially the so-called Muslims. Now I'm coming to my point. You know that in Slovenia, ex-Yugoslavia, where Stalinism was softer, there was nonetheless in Slovenia in 49 to 51 one very traumatic political trial, the only one that we had in this true good old Stalinist style, public loudspeakers, blah, blah, the accused confessed, demanded death penalty. It was so-called Dachau trial. Can you imagine the trauma? Those communists who survived Dachau were imprisoned for economic crimes, mostly sabotaging electricity. But the idea was, you survived it, and your very survival is the proof that you survived because you were becoming Nazi agents, betraying your pals who didn't survive, and after the war you became English spy, whatever. But the point is this uneasiness, as if, how should I put it, from this vision, the figure of Musulman, of this reduction to the zero level of humanity is unthinkable, it's a betrayal. It's as if even the concentration camp has to be perceived as a site of struggle, heroes fight and so on. Here, I think, we should learn, and I will say now something which may sound problematic to some of you, but I think that this is one of the most radical insights into the way Holocaust was done, which even, I think, condemns more the Nazis. I ask always myself a very stupid question. Why is it that almost all the good movies about Holocaust are comedies? And then I connected this to no, it's very serious if this is a man of Primo Levi.
Yeah.
You remember that wonderfully terrifying description of this called selection. How each prisoner had literally 2-3 seconds just to run naked in front of a SS doctor, and then it was, are you burned or you survive? I noticed that the only way to describe that scene is as a kind of a totally terrifying comedy. I mean, how Primo Levi describes the preparations, you know, the inmates gave to each other advices, how the point was to appear fit enough, you know, to pinch your lips, to pull in if you had any of it, stomach and so on. So the idea came to me that to present, and this is on what this communist resistance referred to present concentration camp as just another site of resistance and tragedy. Tragedy is not strong enough. In tragedy, you still retain a minimum of dignity. There is a point when things get really terrifying, that in a way, I think true horror is beyond tragedy. It's ridiculous to say you give too much to the Nazis. If you describe all those terrifying humiliations of the prisoners as tragic, there is a dimension beyond there. And this seems to me very crucial. Just another brief point. When you said, I totally agree with you about this suicide murder, and just I have a one-line question for you. Do you know the book published at Duke University last year, Lee Edelman, I think, No Future, where he precisely tries to, even with some unfortunate references to me, this kind of a basically ethics, basically this suicidal ethics. Yeah. No future, the ultimate ethical betrayal is the gaze of a child. I also find it problematic, even if with surprise I discovered that I'm the good guy there.
Yeah.
Put it. No,
yeah.
but
yeah.
sorry,
well,
I
we
finished.
can certainly talk about that
Yeah.
if you want.